One. Okay, good afternoon. Today is May the 6th. This is the meeting for the LGBTQ Caucus of the Metro Council of Nashville and Davidson County. We are together today to talk about a number of items. I am hearing some feedback, so I will go ahead and ask everybody to mute. Awesome. I have an agenda in front of us. It also is visible on the screen. Those present are the members of the caucus, Mr. Zach Young, Mr. Russ Bradford, Mr. Brett Withers, and Ms. Emily Benedict, as well as myself, Nancy Van Rees. Although we are district council members, in the part of our role on the caucus is to not only represent those in our districts, but also those in the LGBTQ community throughout Davidson County. So with that, I have the first item on the agenda, which is the approval of the minutes from January 21st. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Cool. All those in favor of approving those minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
I think that's everybody. I don't believe anyone is opposed. Thank you very much, Mr. Bradford, for maintaining those minutes as I hope you are for today as well. Beyond that, our next item on the agenda is kind of an overview of those last action items. The first of which is the preparation of a resolution calendar for annual events. Mr. Withers has sent an early Excel spreadsheet for a comprehensive list. Not that we would have resolutions for all of them, but I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Withers to let us know where he is with that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I've piecing together everything for a movement as broad as ours is a little bit difficult. So I've been piecing together some stuff. I sent over a list a little earlier this afternoon. It includes a number of sort of what I guess you would call Visibility Day events that are recognized in different ways for those new to the council or for those who are viewing or listening from home or in posterity. What we have done, we being Councilmember Van Rees and I have done over the prior term, is that one or the other or both of us would introduce a resolution at the council recognizing Nashville Pride. And if possible, we would either have that be done as a presentation at the council office or at one of the Metro Council meetings, or we would read the proclamation from the stage at Pride, which actually works pretty well. I think that reaches probably the broadest possible audience because you have so many more people attending Pride itself than most council meetings, but either one or both is fine. Other than that, I have, I don't know that I did every single year, but I have typically done a Transgender Day of Remembrance resolution, partly because that one is, again, the transgender community, number one, faces some unique challenges and threats specifically for who they are that many of us who are cisgender, even within the equality movement, do not. But also the transgender community crosses the broad spectrum of humanity. So that is that resolution, similar to Pride, sort of is kind of for everyone, even though it is specifically mentioning Transgender Day of Remembrance. Of course, there's also Transgender Day of Visibility and things like that. In some cases, but not all, in some cases with Transgender Day of Remembrance, we have passed it on a voice vote. In some cases, we have actually had a no vote or two from council members. I think most council members, whatever their comfort level with the transgender community is, recognize that being murdered or potentially being murdered for who you are is worthy of condemnation, and that folks who face that kind of violence deserve our support as humans. So usually that one has not necessarily been a problem, but we have had no votes on that in the past. For those who are a little bit newer to the council, you may notice that Metro Council agendas often can include any number of memorializing or honorary resolutions. I don't necessarily believe that it's necessary to do a resolution for everything particularly, but we can also do proclamations, which a lot of times are nice things to do if one of us among the caucus, we're attending some sort of an event for a group or organization. That might be an effective way to memorialize that without necessarily taking time at a Metro Council agenda, is that we could all work on a proclamation. We can also do press releases and letters to the editor of papers. There are other ways that we can recognize any of these events, but the two that we have traditionally over the last 4 years done resolutions for have been recognizing Nashville Pride itself, as well as Transgender Day of Remembrance. We have, I think Councilmember Van Rees, I think last year we had worked on Day of Silence, I think it was, with GLSEN, although what we may, it's a little bit unusual if the Day of Silence were actually on the day of a council meeting that we have to talk. So there could be some logistical challenges to recognizing that with actual silence. But we could still recognize it again through a press release or a letter or something like that, social media channels if we all wanted to work with GLSEN and use our social media platforms to advance that. So that's what we've done in the past. Wanted to put some of these out before the body just to get your thoughts about that suggestion of picking maybe a limited number of events every year for an actual resolution, highlighting some other items that we might want to place on a calendar for proclamations or letters to the editor, or just what do people think is the best way to reach the most people or the most impacted communities with different means of outreach that are available to the Metro Council.
That's great. I think you started with your Excel spreadsheet, an idea that a lot of the folks with Nashville Pride are doing in having some sort of shared folder. We can talk to Metro Legal about the right way to do it, but in an easy world, you'd have a shared Google Drive, and we could kind of all highlight what we feel like is appropriate for resolution versus proclamation, and do that by month, and kind of have a shared conversation on paper. And so we can work with the council office on this new format that they're building to maybe do something like that, so that that we can kind of dive into being effective, because we don't have a communications director for our caucus, but we do, I think, need to first and foremost just be visible, be present, and talk about not just a day that happens to be a particular day of the year that someone decided to claim for remembering or celebration, but the purpose behind it. So it's the educational opportunities. So I'd like to hear from others about their thoughts on this subject.
Chair, if I may jump in.
Sure.
First of all, Councilmember Withers, I think this is just a fantastic list. Thank you so much for putting this together. It's very thorough, and it touches on so many important dates and days of remembrance and days that we just want to make sure that the LGBTQ community and beyond is aware of all the celebration of the struggles and the challenges that we have faced and continue to face. So this is awesome. Chair, I wanted to speak to your point about creating like a shared drive. The Public Works Committee just did create a SharePoint drive. So I know that must fit some type of open, communication piece, but maybe Ms. Hayes could help us with how that was set up, or help direct us to doing something like that where we could manage through the process like what you said. So as I look at this, there's definitely some days on here that I'd love to say, hey, let's look at this, and also then try to figure out, do we do 6 per year? Do we do, back to the point of what Councilmember Withers said, we don't do them all, but which ones do we do? And then the prioritization, as you mentioned. So I'm not sure what that would look like, but a shared drive, I think, is an excellent way to handle that.
And I'm going over the spreadsheet, and I'm noticing that there are a couple of events that are coming up. If we wanted to talk about what we want to do with those, I'm seeing on May 17th is the International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia, and Biphobia. And then on the 22nd, we've got Harvey Milk Day. Those could be something we could get done and submitted before Friday so that they could be on the next council meeting.
Thank you for that feedback, Russ. I think that we did the Harvey Milk Day Remembrance last year because of an anniversary. If I recall, Brett, we did that because of a particular anniversary of Harvey Milk's assassination.
I think that's right.
Know. Yeah. So I don't know that we necessarily need to do that again, because it's not a Nashville centric historic day. But I do think that June obviously is coming up, and there's a lot in June, and something very specific that is important to a lot of Davidson County residents is, of course, the anniversary of the Supreme Court case for marriage, Pride Month, Abby Rubenfeld's work on both marriage and the sodomy laws. And it's, we could do something even just regarding the historic month as it relates to our LGBT folks in Nashville and how they were instrumental in some of those things. I'd like to do our best to tie it back to Davidson County whenever possible. The other thing that I'm seeing on this list, of course, was the Pulse Night of Remembrance. I know that I still have pictures from that historic day on the court steps where we saw Nashville come out spontaneously in support of solidarity of that tragedy. I think that we may be able to even put together some sort of press release about memories of our reaction to that, having those images available. So, I don't know if Zach, if you've got any feedback in regard to the best way. I know that you're not a big fan of a whole bunch of resolutions, but I do like the idea of proclamations. What are your thoughts on this?
I have several, actually. So yeah, my concern with resolutions is just that so many people do so many. I feel that the the value of them. I mean, it's just lost. I think they're kind of like what you and others have mentioned this evening. I think there are much better, more public and meaningful ways to recognize some of these things. I would suggest that we select a handful of the more hate to use the phrase more important, because I'm not trying to rank any sort of thing over another, but I would caution us to doing too many. I think the proclamations are great, but I also think we have a lot of power in the sense that maybe we haven't latched onto in creating a Facebook page for the caucus, and I can see social media being a great tool, or like Councilman Withers was saying, letters to the editor that we all sign on to about a lot of these days and events. I think the message would get out much further than a resolution that's stuck on a consent agenda. And I don't mean to necessarily demoralize rare resolutions, but I feel like most of them get lost in an alphabet soup of resolution numbers, and that we don't very pay that much attention to them. But so I kind of like what I've heard this evening of maybe looking at alternate ways of recognizing all these events and days, because I think they're definitely worth recognition.
Well, I don't think that Metro Legal's gonna, let us have our own social media platform that might give everybody heartburn. But I do think that we have been individually kind of finding. There was one or two that I stumbled on that I kind of jumped onto, even though the last 6 weeks or so, on lesbian awareness, trying to kind of be visible on those types of things. But I do think that what we could do as a caucus is just agree that every quarter, every 3 months, there should be at least one action, if not more, as determined by the caucus, that recognizes one of these very specific opportunities. The month of June and October are always going to be extremely busy for our community, as you know, with all the things that happens in June in our history, and with World AIDS Day and Coming Out Day. There's just kind of pulse points that we know are important to us that others still are learning about. We have to remember the 13-year-old in class that's trying to do a paper on something, and us talking about it makes it okay to do a paper on it, so we have to be mindful of that, but you're absolutely right about not wanting it just to get lost. And so I'd like to, for the purpose of the agenda, just move that we agree that we will work with an opportunity to have a shared file to make notes on these items, so that we know what it is we want to write about, write a resolution about, write an op-ed about, or do a resolution for, and kind of do that in that way. So I'd like to move that we make that action and have that set up for us to be able to use.
Councilmember Van Rees, I would support or second that motion. The one thing that I do want to raise to the group while we're on this call, and we are in the month of May, is what, if anything, are we wanting to do about Pride, since June is Pride Month. However, you know, the local Pride Festival itself is postponed and in many other places. Do we want to continue some sort of offline work around, I guess, what do folks envision for this particular quarter that we're in, adopting that sort of strategy? I would assume that we would go with Pride, and if so, what, if anything, should we do for Pride, given the really unusual circumstances in which we find ourselves this year?
Right. Well, there's other things in June. I think that if we kind of talk about LGBT history in the month of June, that it kind of encompasses the reason for Pride, whether it's the Stonewall riots or the marriage amendment or the recognition of solidarity from the Pulse event. All of that can be rolled into a celebration for June, asking the mayor's office to light everything in rainbow during the month of June or during a particular day. And that kind of thing, I think we should be able to do and have it land. I think that second meeting in June is on what day of the week is that? I mean, what is it?
And the second one is on the 9th.
9th? Well, I guess because we're having the 9th, it would be the one after that is pretty late in June. It's I'm getting a calendar. 23rd. Yeah.
Okay.
My concern with doing it.
Supreme Court marriage, all that stuff happened on June the 26th. I mean, like, let's do something for to submit so that it's on resolution is on the agenda for the 23rd.
Okay.
Sounds great.
Well, and kind of what my idea had been, since we have to have a lead sponsor, if we had a Pride Festival in June this year, kind of what my suggestion was, since I introduced the last one from the last term, I'm happy to work with the council office, since I already have, on some of that content, maybe. What I was going to suggest is to do a rotation through the rest of the caucus, to have other members have an opportunity to present it. So if it's okay with the body, I'll continue working with the council office on sort of content, and also with the mayor's office on some of those suggestions that Councilmember Van Rees raised. So I'll take that on as a project that we'll do something for June, and just continue. Would one of the other caucus members want to be the lead sponsor on the resolution, since I did it last time?
I need to. Yeah.
Y'all just tell me where to sign my name.
Well, I guess kind of what I thought is there are 5 of us, and I did the last one last time. So I just want to share that opportunity, amongst the caucus. So
I think I heard Councilmember Benedict offer to do it this year.
Okay.
And if you could, in reviewing that, please include a whereas regarding the Supreme Court marriage anniversary on the 26th, because that will be a 5-year anniversary, believe it or not, for that on June the 26th.
Okay. I'll be happy to do that, and then also sort of run some things past the mayor's office for, lighting this and doing this, that, and the other in the absence of a physical Pride Festival. I'm happy to do all of that.
Okay, so we have a motion and second in regard to looking for a way to do this online without a meeting. And all those in favor of that, okay? So
Aye.
yes.
Aye.
Okay. Um, uh, Councilmember Benedict, since you have some knowledge from for the other committee as to how that happened, could you reach out to the council office and let them know that we'd also like to do that?
Without question, absolutely, Chair.
Okay. Cool. Okay, groovy. You guys are awesome. The other item on our follow-up was just the resolution to ask Governor Lane to veto HB 836 and SB 1304. We all know that happened. And we'll continue to look for opportunities to be vocal. I don't think that we need to talk more about that. Ms. Ashley Davis was reappointed to the Community Oversight Board and retains her work there. I think that it would be great if this committee, this caucus agrees at our next meeting, whatever that is, to ask Ms. Davis to come and report back to us on her experiences during that serving in that way. Does that, does everybody like that idea?
I do. I'm trying to remember, is Andres Martinez still on the board as well?
He was. I don't know if he had to be reapproved because she had just 1 year and so she had to do another vote. But you're right, they made, I believe he is also. I know that she's still serving as chair, but we could ask both of them. That'd be fantastic. If you guys like that idea, then.
Who was the other person?
Andres Martinez, who is, I'm trying to think of what organization he works with. He is a District 6 resident. I believe that's it. Yeah, I think that's right. And he is a District 6 constituent. So.
Oh, I see how you are.
I mean, I guess I don't understand the connection or the pertinence of the COB to the caucus. I mean, does that mean we're going to ask someone on the PZA to come talk to us if they happen to be LGBTQ? I think we should stick to our mission.
Well, Zach, if I may speak to that, I understand that because we do have LGBT community members who are serving on lots of boards, and we obviously want to increase that if we can. I think with the Community Oversight Board itself playing such a possibly controversial but also crucial role in establishing communication between the police department and all communities, but especially communities that maybe historically have had some challenges with policing. I think that both Ms. Davis and Andres would be able to bring, I would just welcome an opportunity to hear their insights about how they're being a part of a couple of overlapping communities has informed their experience serving on the board and hopefully contributed to positive outcomes on the board in terms of improving police community relations. I guess is what I'm saying.
Okay, I just want to make sure if members of other boards don't feel like we're cutting them out or something, but I get it.
Yeah, I like the idea of inviting them to speak with us from time to time, just so they can kind of give us an update or some information on how they believe that their role on whatever board or commission they sit influences or affects the overall LGBTQ community in Nashville. There may not be any direct relations or impacts, but I think it'd be nice for us as a caucus to kind of hear from and see what is being done out in the county and some of these boards and commissions.
Great. I appreciate all the feedback. I'm envisioning we had such a good meeting in January with getting organizations to kind of give us updates on things. I think that I'm hoping that we'll be able to do that again by late summer. And if so, inviting them to also present may be the appropriate way to do that.
Maybe another listening type session like we had before, except this time it's those individuals.
Yeah, yeah. The action item on this would be a little premature, I guess, as far as the agenda is concerned. But when we do meet again, I in person, I guess would be for the purpose of the action. When we meet again in person, it would be to the intent of having a community feedback session again. And at that time, we would include folks from the COB to present, much in the way that we did the Human Relations Commission the first time. Is there consensus on that idea?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Speaking for myself, yes.
Anybody
Yes,
opposed to that idea? Anybody opposed to that concept? Okay. Boards and commissions, we now have, when someone is nominated or by someone, whether it be a council member or solicited by the mayor's office to join a board or commission, they are sent a questionnaire. The questionnaire eventually will be all online. I don't know if it is quite yet, but now I think they're sent a form that they fill out and send back. On that form is now an opportunity to self-identify as LGBTQ. You don't have to. Doesn't mean that you aren't if you don't check it, but it does give us an opportunity to be able to kind of check to see whether or not appropriate representation is being held. This was with support of the mayor's office that this took place, and it's very similar to what Metro HR will be doing in the future for the appropriate self-ID, just so that we can get better counts, because we know if we don't get counted, we don't count. So that was a really important first step, and go on record for thanking the folks on the Rules and Confirmations Committee for asking the clerk to for that to take place so that it could. Were there any questions about that procedure, or Brett, do you have any insight from your past experience on the human relations side to help us with the process on this?
Well, the main thing with is that from the HR side of the house is that there can be concerns about folks being targeted in ways that aren't appropriate if they do identify, which is a fear that not everyone is comfortable with, right? So I think having it be an optional thing is good. I will share with the group on this call that I have a constituent, just as an example, but I have a constituent who expressed an interest in serving on a Metro board. She has a lot of industry expertise in that area. She is a member of the LGBT community. She is a small business owner. Obviously, she's a female, women-owned business. So I sent over the way that I kind of handled it with the mayor's office is that I sent over her resume and asked to speak with the mayor's office representative who handles boards and commissions. And I said, hey, could I talk to you about this in terms of from a diversity standpoint? And so we talked about a lot of that verbally, but I have no doubt that this constituent would be comfortable with it. We just kind of wanted to provide that background kind of verbally with the mayor's office about the different diversity and inclusion categories that this particular applicant meets. And so that way that sort of invites that communication to take place during interviews with the mayor's office. So some of that's a little bit informal still, I guess, for me. I don't want necessarily to send over a resume to say here is, someone to consider because they're LGBT, but I just make sure that information is included in discussions with the mayor's office about some different perspectives that applicants can bring to boards and commissions.
Fantastic.
And then obviously, if the person does feel comfortable with disclosing that on a form, great. But they may or may not, but they would still bring that perspective to bear, whether, to your point, Nancy, whether or not they check that box, they would still bring some of those perspectives to bear, and that could be very valuable from the inclusion standpoint.
Well, it's important for the five of us as well as allies to remember when they're making nominations or they see someone from their districts that would be ideal for any boards or commission, that they encourage them to do so regardless of sexual orientation. But we do want to make sure that we do our part to have our metro government count when we ask for that opportunity. So that was pretty cool. The next thing on the follow-up was the Nashville Tree Foundation's tree placement. I've asked for an update from the Nashville Tree Foundation. I have not gotten an update. I'm sure that we'll get one, but we did approve a location for a yellow wood to be planted. And the idea was to have that done during the month of June for Pride, but now we've got plenty of time. So I will find out from them kind of what their timeline is so that we can have another opportunity to let people know that that's taken place, and they'll take care of most of that for us, but that is happening. People might not realize that they reached out to us to want to plant a tree. It was not our idea, it was their idea. And so we're very happy and pleased to be able to thank them for that. A plaque will be on the tree or near the tree or beside the tree or under the tree or somewhere to indicate that not with our names on it, but that the historic year of the 2019 election that created the first LGBTQ caucus. So that's still happening. We all know the HRC dinner was postponed. And in addition to that, the Mayor's Council Committee to issue Women in Public Service resolutions in June has also been deferred indefinitely. The Women's Council Committee will not be offering any additional resolutions on behalf of the committee in conjunction with the Women's Caucus until July for the August anniversary of the suffrage, the women's right to vote in August. So that's not happening, and it is an opportunity for us to maybe next year for this caucus to consider doing that on our own. But that's the update on that I have for you. June Pride Month, we know, has been postponed, and I wanted to open up discussion in regard to other ways that we can help celebrate other than just the resolutions that we've just talked about. Letters to the editors, resolutions, and things of that nature are great. But there's also going to be a number of different online, I think there's going to be like a World Pride something where it's virtual, and sharing that to the best of our ability. Did any other caucus members have comments about the best way to promote the celebration of Pride in Nashville during June?
Chair, I have an idea about the Pride Board is still assembled, of course, and so I wonder if it would be beneficial to do some type of a web event, whether that's something that's pre-recorded and then shared somehow, managed better than our council meetings lately, that, where we might be able to highlight the way that organizations are celebrating Pride while dealing with this pandemic, and then also us showing the support that we have to those organizations, and that we want to make sure that they're still receiving, that they're still engaging with the public in a meaningful way. So maybe that would be something from, having leading organizations in the area, whether that's the Pride Board, the Chamber, GLAD, name them all, right? I can't even catch them all right now, but off the top of my head, but try maybe have some type of a town hall, or again, maybe a pre-recorded, hey, everybody get on, and I can't quite articulate the idea, but in totality, but basically some type of an event that would take the place of the fact that we can't get together to celebrate in person, but that people could use that to perhaps celebrate, individually, online in some way, whether that's pre-recorded or a live event.
Yeah, you got to think that Nashville Pride is considering that very opportunity. And I can commit to this caucus that I just reach out to them and let them know that if they are planning any sort of online event, that the caucus would like to participate. Is that what I'm hearing from everybody?
That'd be great.
Also, we've got the publications throughout town, like Out and About. Maybe reach out to them for some kind of special edition or a special article about the caucus or about Pride. Each of us, maybe also on our own on social media, each week, one of us posting something about our experiences or our thoughts on Pride, go out each week on social media, and then everybody reshare or retweet. Also, the individual who interviewed me the other day is very open and willing to sit down individually with members of the caucus to do interviews for their radio blog as well. That could be something that we could do in the month of June.
Well, what we could do as an action item is that all of these possibilities that we're going to organically go to as individuals already, if we share them or if we have our own content that we send out, if we could all use the hashtag LGBTQ Caucus or Caucus Nash, or put our logo on it, or what are thoughts on that, just so that folks can identify the fact that that the caucus is part of that communication.
I'm getting on Twitter right now to look at different hashtags.
My request would be that once that's some format is decided, that and I know the chair probably has expertise in this, putting together I don't know that I would call it a style kit, but just the what format we prefer and want to say. Mainly something I can copy and paste so I don't mistype or miscapitalize a hashtag or something. So mainly just to keep me in check is what I'm requesting.
I don't know if that's possible, but we could try.
Same here. I'm not tech savvy like that.
Well, yes.
From a hashtag perspective, all that I can find that is similar is San Francisco, and they have SFA _ LGBTQ Caucus. So beyond that, and in fact, I'd actually love to see if we could somehow have, not just the hashtag, but have a page for our caucus now. Maybe I'm putting the cart ahead of the horse at some point, and I'm not volunteering to manage that. So. But by doing that, I happen to lose. So I don't know if
that's an additional action item. Yeah, that's because of the aforementioned experience. What I will do is talk to ITS about a LGBTQ Caucus page on Nashville.gov, so that our resolutions, our information, and our meetings are at a place where people can find them. That should be fairly easy to do. And Mr. Bradford created an excellent logo for us. It's beautiful in its simplicity. And I think that we can use that. I hate using up that many letters in a tweet, right? But Nash or Metro, those types of things. Let's look up the best way, and then I will put together a style kit that would be housed as an item on that website, on that page, so that it could be used properly. I think that would be the appropriate way to do it, and I can find out if I'm totally off step or not fairly quickly, because I can just provide even just a handful of very easy graphics sized properly for you to put along with your own comments, that kind of thing. So I'm writing that down, and please put it in the minutes so I don't forget, Mr. Bradford. That will be something that I work on for us. We're moving now to really the meat of our meeting, and I appreciate everyone's hanging in there. This is great. The discussion of COVID-19 health effect on our communities, vulnerable populations. We received some information that was forwarded regarding this impact study, both from HRC as well as Vanderbilt. That was very revealing. I publicly thanked Chair Sharon Hurt, both in the Health and Hospitals Committee as well as on the floor last night, for her including some of these statistics in her COVID report. But again, for the record on this call and for anyone listening, the LGBTQ Americans are experiencing difficulties accessing medical care, avoiding routine medical care, and having difficulties assessing routine medications. 14% are reporting difficulties getting medications, 24% difficulties in accessing health care, and nearly 59% avoiding going to the doctor for routine care. This is a report from Vanderbilt University. There's a number of different appropriate things listed in this document. Again, this would be another document that we could ask Metro to provide a link to from the Human Rights Campaign as well as Vanderbilt on this subject. The survey is a national survey and not one that is particularly Davidson County related, but we know that we're really not that much different anywhere. And also looking at the older LGBTQ Tennesseans and COVID from the policy lab that Tara McKay sent out that was more specific to Tennessean averages. The details in that report also include that the older Americans, meaning 65 plus, 83% agree that the virus is a significant threat to their overall health. 70% to their life. It's a threat to their life. There's been significant pay cuts at work and benefits packages. It's much like everybody right now, but in particular, higher levels of stress and isolation are of concern to me. And this report from Vanderbilt was brought to us via Ms. Benedict first. And so I'd like to have you just share your thoughts regarding that report.
Thank you, Chair. You touched on a lot of it, and for me, what the take home really is that we're all going through some just a life-altering experience, something that no one who is currently alive has ever gone through, right? So as far as, stay at home and for a long time and don't be around people too much. But I absolutely think that in the LGBTQ community, it particularly isolates people even more. Folks who have, potentially are already isolated now have even fewer opportunities to be around people who they view are like them. Of course, I would encourage everyone to see that we are all like each other. But I know that oftentimes we can miss that in our own, due to our upbringings or other adverse relationships and examples that we've had in our lives. So for me, the big takeaway is that isolation and making sure that the mental health concerns that result from that are addressed. So I would like to see, digesting this for a couple of days now, I would like to see the caucus put together some type of it doesn't even need to be a resolution in my opinion, but some collaboration with our health department to determine a way that we could, as a city, focus on this a bit more than what I've seen us doing. I think at this point in the state of emergency, we've been, things continue to change every day. I think we have a real opportunity as a caucus to lead this topic. And so if we could also get the backing of the health department in some particular way, whether that's working with, just finding whether that's working with Nashville Cares or, any way that we, or the Oasis Center, some way that we can get this information to the community through the Department of Health to help make sure that people continue to be told about the resources that are available to them so that that isolation piece can be tackled and managed through. Because my fear is that as a community that already has a significantly higher suicide rate, for instance, this is a time that we can, as we're isolated, we all see more and more of us are getting in our heads, and that's not a good place to be for a long time for most of us, right? I think that to me is the safety of the LGBTQ community is of utmost concern in this particular case, and that's what I believe this report demonstrates as well. So I would like to see from this caucus, I'd like to hear from everybody else what your thoughts are about how we might be able to use this information to create a call to action for our health department, and if that does mean a resolution of some sort or a letter to the administration, whatever it might be, I'd love to see us take some action on it. I'll stop there.
With my request from last week for some attention to seniors led to the 65 plus in COVID-19 webinar that's happening tomorrow. And I think that talking to Dr. Caldwell Hoot, shout out to him. He's been in all of our meetings, except for this one. Before he was even confirmed, he was at both our January and March meeting, or whenever it was, like a year ago, to put together a similar panel for LGBTQ and COVID-19 with Nashville Cares, Just Us, Vanderbilt Health, and let Vanderbilt Health help with that study. And we've got the experts. Why not gather them? That I think we could ask the mayor's office to consider to do. What is everybody's thoughts on that?
I think 54 would be a good organization to reach out to for the senior LGBTs. That reach out to them. Hey, we want to create a panel to discuss topics that are important or that impact the senior LGBT community, and we'd like 54 to have a seat at that table or to help facilitate that discussion. To some of the earlier points that were brought up, I don't think a resolution would be the way we could go with that. I would say a letter or press release from the caucus stating, once we get an agreement with the health department, a letter or statement coming out saying LGBTQ Caucus partners with Metro Health Department to create a, whether it's a task force or a board or something. We can find the words later, but I think that's what we'd do there is just a letter and a press release saying that this is what we're partnering with and what we hope to come of it.
I'm not trying to oversimplify things, but I mean, could it not just be a letter that is signed by all of us that is then just sent to Dr. Caldwell? I mean, maybe I'm not following.
Yeah, I don't even think it needs to be that. I mean, I think that we can, tomorrow is our Thursday call. I can just send a note to the vice mayor saying that we'd like to thank the mayor's office and the health department for the series of webinars that they are conducting for a number of different groups. And that the LGBT Caucus would like to help facilitate an additional webinar with appropriate conversation to those in our community. And I think that he would absolutely jump on that. It's just a matter of bandwidth, of course, for everybody. But if we can, as a caucus, help facilitate the right people to conduct that webinar, primarily, obviously, Tara McKay from Vanderbilt, who presented the older LGBTQ Tennesseans in COVID report. And I think that having her and Nashville Cares and Just Us and 50 Forward is a powerful panel that can address all the items on our agenda in regard to making sure that people can find resources that they may feel uncomfortable looking for. So if you guys are okay with that, just the timing of this meeting means that we can actually make that request on our council call tomorrow morning. And that would expedite it. You guys feel okay with that?
I feel thrilled about that. I think that the sooner the better. I think having a sense of urgency about this is important so that it shows the commitment to it shows us leading and letting the community know how important they are, and that we want to make sure that they are as safe as we can possibly help them be during this time. I love it.
That's right. That's right. Cool. I will do that. I believe Brandon from the mayor's office, as well as Mr. Jameson, may be listening to this, and so they know that's coming.
I'll be on the phone with Mike in just a little while when this meeting wraps, so I'll give him a heads up about it.
Okay, cool. And I'll send a note to the vice mayor to let him know I'll be asking that question. Were there, what else is on here? Oh yeah, the budget. Oh yeah, there's that thing. Brett and I, this is our 5th budget.
Hey, Councilmember Van Rees.
Yeah.
Before we start the budget, I had one last thing kind of related to COVID I wanted to throw out, if I could.
Please.
So I know there's been attention to like small business as a whole, but I think, excuse me, I'm combining words. I'm not sure what exactly our role would be, but right now I know that a lot of LGBTQ owned or friendly small businesses are hurting. Some of them much more than others. When I think of some of the great businesses on Church Street that also create spaces where people feel safe. And I don't have any action or anything. I just ask that we kind of keep that in mind. I know that the LGBT Chamber is doing great work trying to keep all of their members informed on relief efforts and ways to stay afloat. But I just ask that we remember that part of our community as well when we think about this health crisis that's also becoming an economic crisis on places that allow several members of our community to have a place where they feel safe, and members of our community who make sacrifices to always support LGBTQ causes. So I just, like I said, not to talk in circles, I just wanted us to not leave LGBTQ small business out of the equation tonight.
Thank you for that. And I think that having Joe Woolley from the LGBT Chamber on the Small Business Task Force has been instrumental in making sure that voice is heard. There was an oversight early on that website that they left them off, and so we had to put them back on. So we're being diligent in making sure that that voice is heard through that task force. If you want to reach out directly to Joe Woolley to see if he feels as concerned about not being heard, then we would want to make action on that. But I have not heard that. I appreciate you just making us pause and remember that there are hundreds of thousands of business owners that are suffering, and those that primarily their customer base is our community that you're referring to is particularly vulnerable. So thanks.
Chair, one other thing to add, getting back to COVID and how it affects communities. When we started meeting, or we formed this panel or task force with the health department and others, that we either include or think of how our homeless LGBT population is more so affected by the virus. Just kind of keep that in mind.
Yes, yes, those four groups that are on, the three groups that are on our agenda for the health effect, HIV and other immune deficiencies, homeless youth, and seniors, we would want to participate on the panel that we are requesting. It would be a no-brainer to have Dr. McKay help with that. But whether it's just us or Launchpad that is available for that, you're absolutely right. But we would want to make sure that if it took place, that those particular groups are represented. And I'm hearing from Mr. Young that we need to make sure that those small business calls and webinars for small businesses and how to properly open and how to protect your employees and your customers, that we continue to support the LGBT Chambers outreach to make sure that they get those resources as well. So that I'm fairly confident that is happening. But if it's not, we need to make sure that we know that we want to know that so that we can help. The mayor's budget is about to be under review. I know that Councilmember Benedict is on the Budget and Finance Committee. Who else? Who else of us is on that committee?
Me, myself, and I.
So the other four of us are not. Okay. I'm encouraging everyone, I know that Brett's as nerdy as I am, to watch all of the committee meetings, even if you don't have to go. You'll learn a whole lot more and not be inclined to ask questions that were answered already if you watch and listen to those meetings. And so, mark your calendar now for all of those meetings and just pretend like you have to be there, like Emily. There's going to be a whole lot discussed. We're going to go up and down and sideways and back and forth. And I think that we can all assume there's going to be some sort of substitute budget. That's a big assumption already, but in making sure that if, let's see, how can I say this? If dollars are found, if dollars are moved, if dollars are added or subtracted, that we are all mindful of how they may or may not directly, if not indirectly, everybody, but directly affect those in our community. So I know that there are opportunities that we haven't even dreamed up yet that we will hear through this process, but I'm just asking this caucus to be mindful when it comes to how we hear from our community about the budget. And so as we move into later in the month and there's public feedback, I'd like to be able to offer our LGBTQ community to contact us regardless or in addition to their council member if don't live in our district, for anything that directly concerns them as a member of our community in Davidson County. It's the only real way that I think that we're going to be able to say that we are representing that community is if they feel represented. So, so there's not a whole lot we can really talk about at this point because we're still got to talk about it as a whole. But I did want just to kind of bounce out to the four of you guys, if you were in the same mindset as me in regard to just making it clear, and even in this series of communications, that if you are a member of the LGBTQ community in Davidson County and something about the budget directs you, is affecting you directly that you're concerned about, that you can also reach out to us as well as your at-large and district council member. What are your thoughts on that?
This is Brad. I agree with that. And one thing that comes to mind, I guess, for me is I know that, just to throw out one example, but Councilmember Suara, for instance, I think this weekend is having like a virtual town hall. If we have colleagues who are doing something like that, if maybe it might not be possible to sort of raise some of these issues or have a guest speaker or something like that to sort of raise some of these issues as part of those calls. Those calls obviously would have a broader audience if it's an overall town hall, but to the extent that LGBT issues, sidewalks are LGBT issues because LGBT people use sidewalks, right? I mean, like, don't think of that too narrowly. But, with reductions, not obviously to all of the chambers, with reductions in spending to nonprofits, the potential elimination of community education, there are any number of those topics that are going to be discussed within the budget that really may have some particular effects on the LGBT community that maybe we haven't thought about. And it would be appropriate not only for them to contact us as 5 council members who are out of 40 who are voting, but also to raise some of those topics as an LGBT lens as some of those other cuts are being discussed in the broader town hall meetings. Does that make sense?
It does, and that could be another opportunity for us to join with Joe and the chamber, maybe have them host an LGBTQ budget town hall, and we can, like you said, discuss the budget, how it potentially impacts our community.
So I have a few thoughts. First, Councilwoman Suarez plan, as I understand it, just from what I've seen on Facebook and that she's promoted, is that she'll be doing one of these town halls every Saturday afternoon at 3 for, I guess, through the budget season at a minimum, at least for the rest of the month of May, but I believe she's going to be doing it through June as well. This upcoming one on Saturday the 9th is with Councilwomen Stiles and Toombs. And so what I would suggest we do is ask if one of us might be able to be a guest on one of her Saturday afternoon calls so that we can speak to those concerns directly. Maybe ask Joe or other organizations what questions or what items they'd like us to address, as well as to join that Facebook Live event so that they can answer questions should Councilwoman Suara be open to that. That might be a way that we could leverage a larger community than just the LGBTQ community, but focus, make sure that everybody understands what our needs are rather than, and also make sure that folks from the LGBT community also are hearing what other needs are, which, want to make sure that we're being all inclusive, right, of everyone as much as possible. So I might suggest that one of us, and I'm certainly, Councilwoman Suara and I are both on the Budget and Finance Committee. I'm glad to reach out to her and see if that's something you guys want me to do that. I'd be glad to do that. And want to circle back to the chair's initial suggestion that we all attend all of the budget meetings. At a minimum, if you're not able to attend all of them, I would strongly urge each of you to attend the event tomorrow night that Councilmember Mendez is hosting at 4 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. I believe you should have a WebEx invitation for that, to where he will run through, especially for the newbies, like 3 of us are, here's what the budget process looks like. And also to get us familiar with that. I have another thought, but I'm going to stop there, and I want to come back to my other thought once everybody else is, because it's totally different.
I'll chime in and say that, we're going to see many amendments and several substitutes, I'm sure. And I think that an obvious target, as we hear a lot of people talking about it, and even other council members sometimes, are the appropriations to the different nonprofits and things, such as the different chambers. Obviously, in a perfect world, we protect, or those are preserved, but we're in a less than perfect world, and we're in a world or a situation where, all options have to be on the table. There's no need for me to remind everyone the absolute horrific situation that we're in, because no matter what happens to the budget, it's going to have devastating impacts on this county, no matter what. So as members are suggesting, members of the council as a whole are suggesting different cuts to certain areas, I hope that we ask that they do it in an equitable way and not try to target specific groups. Of course, we can't necessarily help what others try to do, but I hope that we're able to hopefully frame it in a way for others that not necessarily adding money to one chamber and taking from another, or what have you. But I do hope that I'm prepared this budget season that nothing that is going to be proposed is anything personal against anyone, because I know there will be proposals. Well, I don't know this, but I can only assume that there will be proposals to cut things that are near and dear to many of us. But I think, and I'm starting to pontificate slightly, however, all 40 council members are in a very high stress situation for the next several weeks. And I think that we have a duty as a caucus to make sure that we lead with compassion. And I'm getting off track a little bit, and I digress. But anyways, point being, let's try and make sure that as different cuts do get proposed, we make sure that they're done and proposed in an equitable way, whether or not we support them, but that we do bring up the equity part, if that makes any sense.
Hey, Zach, it does. Council, I don't know if y'all tuned in to all of the budget deliberations from this time last year or the one before. There was pretty, the last two budgets that we had were also sort of status quo at best. And obviously we had proposals to adjust the property tax rate even at those times. But we had some pretty tough decisions to make last time. And I've got to say that while nothing that was proposed specifically targeted the LGBT community itself, there were some pretty interesting, it was interesting to see that individual council members, some of whom are still on the council and some not, really kind of targeted particular organizations.
Yes.
Either to add funding to organizations that weren't currently funded, or to cut funding from organizations that have partnerships with MNPS schools, for example, or whatever. So you're right that you're going to see with this year being even more stressful than it was last year, which is saying a lot. Everyone's going to need to stay on your toes, because there will possibly be requests to add funding to things or to cut funding from things that, frankly, are a little bit personal, I would say. to particular council members or communities, and not saying that it's all good or bad, but put on your seatbelt. It's going to be a bumpy ride. That's the way I would describe it.
Yes, I know that we're all trying to facilitate. We all, I think all of us now have gone through that progressive governance academy training and understand what our strengths are in regard to being the analyst, the bridge builder, the advocate, or the communicator. And we're fortunate that all four groups are represented in spades on this very small caucus. And I think we're just going to rely on each other's professionalism to do those things, to do the research, to bridge build, to champion when appropriate, and to be compassionate and negotiate when necessary. I think it's extraordinary how different the five of us are and how on point we can be whenever we need to be. And I think it's a real example of the diversity of our community to some extent. Because I know, I mean, I'm working with ideas on how 50 forward locations can collaborate with the community education folks so that programming is helped, kind of through 50 forward, even in advance of this budget situation, when those facilities were looking for ways to be open when membership's not there for classes and training, and now even more opportunity there to collaborate so that some classes that are available or have been available can still be available through nonprofit partnerships. People are being creative to come up with things, keeping perhaps personnel and programming in place. A large portion of the classes that take place through community education are arts related, and some of those performing arts and educational training teachers, arts teachers are being impacted already through the arts cuts. And so it's a very tricky weave, and we all have to kind of just be mindful as to the best way to do the best work in as many ways as possible, to be Methodist about it, even though I'm not Methodist. So I, as your chair, just wanted to encourage you to continue to be yourself in all circumstances. And there'll be times where we disagree, but there will be times where we will need to be unified. And I think we will instinctually, honestly, I think we will instinctually know those times when they present themselves.
Chair, I want to jump in. I've got a lot of thoughts on this because I sit on the BNF committee. But Councilmember Bradford hasn't had an opportunity to chime in, and I'd love to hear from him before I throw out to you guys an idea that I've gotten and some food for some questions, some things I'd love to hear from everybody about. But before that, I'd love to hear from Councilmember Bradford if he has anything to generally jump in on.
Well, all I can say is from my personal standpoint, this being my first budget season, I definitely knew going into this how difficult discussing the budget would be, and knowing how passionate people are on both sides of the debate. I think I can say for everybody, we didn't expect for this budget season to be compounded by 2 storms and a worldwide pandemic, which has really added an even extra layer of spice to this already crazy season. So I'm doing my best to stay focused on just hearing everybody out, finding some time once we get the budget to go through it to learn what I can about it. I've already planned on attending all of the budget meetings just so I have the opportunity to see what's going on, and just try to do the best I can.
Awesome. Thank you and I know I put you on the spot. Thank you. So I would love, this is my first go round, but as a rookie on council, but I feel like I'm fortunate to be on this committee with the background that I have. And, one of the things I heard you say, Chair, was things like connecting 50 Forward with community education and seeing how we might be able to create some synergies there that would help with the budget and with the cuts for community education that have been proposed by the mayor. As we work towards this, what I would love to hear from from our caucus, let me back up. We have the opportunity for the first time ever to leverage our size and come out and say the caucus wants this, and that in the budget. So to that end, I would love to hear from the group. Are there any initiatives, any items that you want to make sure that we get left in the budget that you want me to, carry us forward on those things and be that voice while we also then put out together that these are the initiatives that we're for. For instance, making sure that the Barnes Fund, affordable housing, the $5 million that was cut or quote postponed from the current fiscal year gets put back in to this year if possible. Of course, I know a lot of this hinges on a lot of different factors, but I guess the question would be, are there any sacred cows that we want to, maybe they don't become sacred cows, but maybe we say if we can make them sacred cows, these are the ones that we really must have in the budget. As a caucus, I think we have the opportunity as a group of 5 to do that and holds firm on that as a block on those pieces. So, and again, as somebody that's on the Budget and Finance Committee, I can be that person and carry that to the committee and through those hearings to make sure that we get the allocations or in any amendments, or if there's a substitute that, that I might want to put forward to make sure that we address any potential inequities that could result from the tight budget that we're looking at. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I love the way you think. This isn't necessarily something, it's not currently in the budget to protect, but it's something I hope maybe we can go on the offense about, and that's our public employees. And I don't know to what extent we can find money for, whether it's just restoring longevity pay, or whether it's also including steps, or whether it's also including COLA. But and I don't know if that's something that we as a caucus are comfortable taking on, since it's arguably not a specific LGBTQ issue, but that's probably the thing I'm most passionate about and upset about with this budget.
Well, and I think for me, I think it's important that we don't just focus on LGBTQ initiatives within the budget. I think that the budget is a moral document for every Nashvillian. And if we're lifting up all Nashvillians, we're lifting up LGBTQ Nashvillians. So if, by focusing on public employees, we're helping our LGBTQ communities. And so I think that anything that we do in the budget, although there might be things like, let's restore the 50% cut that the budget proposes for the chamber right? Maybe we do want to restore that, but maybe we don't, because that would mean that we really want to do it in um, uh, uh, other areas that are similar to that may be not exactly LGBTQ chamber related, but may have ancillary impact to the LGBTQ community. So I think I think we can vote as a block on certain things, and I would love to see us reconvene during the budget season to evaluate where we are with things after we've had a couple of weeks of hearings, or maybe after the first meeting in June, before we get that final um, that last meeting in June and get the final budget hopefully passed.
I like that idea, especially because once we get access to the budget, we can actually look through it. Then we can all sit down and discuss what we want to fight for. I definitely am on the same page with Zach, Councilmember Young. I would, at the very least, like to see us maintain the step increases, because in my opinion, that was a promise and a commitment we made as an employer to these individuals. And it's very important that we uphold our end of the bargain for these people who have done what they were asked up to. They've worked their time, and they're owed these increases.
Well, this is Councilmember Withers. I appreciate that and enthusiasm for our employees. During the last term, I was the vice chair during 2 years when we had a good budget, and then was the chair of personnel 2 years when we had a bad budget, unfortunately. And so in that role, our personnel committee at that time took the position that we were going to make advocating for employees, even if it meant raising property tax rate, which is what that would have required at that time. This year is a little bit different than the last two budgets because, and I think Councilmember Young had commented on this, the discussion really in Civil Service Commission was furloughing employees. And so I'm, at this moment, grateful that we're not talking about furloughing. But at the same time, we are in a very different budget cycle, not only in the city of Nashville, but I think all cities across the country are going to get to this point eventually. Not all of them have a June 30th budget year, right? So different cities will reach this point at different times. Some other cities, unlike Nashville, some other cities have historically had higher tax bases, have had more employees, and have been able to fund their employees better. And so some of those cities are looking at layoffs in some cases where they are able to do layoffs and not affect essential services. Nashville is not in that position. Nashville has been so bare bones with our employees for so long that we really can't do layoffs of employees without affecting essential services. So some options that other cities have aren't necessarily available to us. Obviously, as well, some of our peer cities looking nationally have different funding streams, different exposure to sales tax as being such a big component of their budgets. Some other cities and other parts of the country are, for example, if they have income tax as a major percentage of their budget. Columbus, Ohio, 2/3 of their budget is from income tax. That won't begin to hit some of those cities till much, much later. But I just kind of frame this because as the council member who's worked with employee representation, a lot of times we do sort of compare our employee pay, benefits, and actions with other cities. And we've always been in a pinch compared to our peer cities because our tax rate is so low and our available tax streams are so limited. But it's just going to be, I do believe Mayor Cooper is right that sooner or later in the next 12 months, many cities, not only here in Tennessee, but across the country are going to be looking at laying off and furloughing employees. And just want to put out there that, yes, absolutely, we want to advocate for restoring steps if we can and things like that. But just don't lose sight of the fact that it's already going to be difficult to justify to many people in our community this year why we need to raise their tax rate, the property tax rate, in order to maintain our employees at the rate that they're at when so many people in our community are losing their jobs and yet still having to pay more property taxes. I just want to put that, just to have everyone keep that in mind, that the discussion we're having with the budget relative to employees this year is different than it was in the last 2 years because we are going to have, maybe as much as 20 to 25% unemployment, new unemployment in Nashville and Davidson County. And yet we're going to be asking property owners all across the county to pay more property taxes. And to the extent that that rate is multiplied by 25% for residential, but 40% for commercial, which includes multifamily, that property tax rate that we are going to need just to maintain the employees that we have at the dollar amount that they are today is going to disproportionately affect those residents who are living in multifamily housing. And that's going to make affordable housing even more challenging. So I'm all with everyone that absolutely we need to look out for our employees and full charge ahead on that. And I've been a very vocal proponent of that for the last couple of years. But I do want to reframe for everyone that the conversation about maintaining employees, even just not laying off or furloughing employees, is already sort of taking care of our employees at considerable expense to everyone in the county. And just kind of keep that in mind because our employees as well, even just keeping them this year, just keeping them and keeping them at the dollar rate that they're at and not furloughing them, to the extent that they live in the county, their taxes are going to go up. So they are still being affected as well by that tax increase. So just kind of keep that in mind about how that balances out. But this year's a very different conversation than it would have been than it was in the last 2 years. I'll be kind of generous as well to Mayor Cooper, that Mayor Cooper is in a position of having to present a budget. And we are in a position as a body of having to pass a budget by June 30th that the state comptroller believes is viable. And so, passing a budget, assuming that hotels and everything are going to come back, is not necessarily a budget that the comptroller is going to find to be viable, or most people will find to be viable. Would absolutely love to get more federal stimulus funding for state and local governments to replace money lost through COVID sales taxes. I just don't know that that can pass by June 30th. So, again, just having been that big, as the personnel committee chair for the last 2 years, which were tough budgets, just want to put that reality check a little bit in mind as we are advocating for our employees.
It's fantastic. I will bring up a couple of different things. Be looking for new legislation that'll be filed for the next meeting from me concerning a request for federal assistance to apartment owners so that they can be compensated for the difference in their lost rent from COVID. And I'm working on that with the Apartment Owners Association as well as Mr. Cooper. So be looking for that. Of course, it's just a request to Congress to do something, but at least we'll be in line. In regard to kind of flags on the hill for me, it would be no surprise to Brett that arts is always first and foremost in my mind. Not just because of Nashville's creative soul, but the jobs. That 50% cut in the arts budget reflects 2,500 jobs that would be lost. Those 2,500 jobs can be restored with half a penny. I mean, the property tax at 4.155, if it was 4.16, it would save 2,500 jobs and the Nashville's creative soul. And so I am everyone. I'm not going to be the only one that's going, hey, if half a penny equals $1.5 million, what can I do with half a penny? And if I give you half a penny, then can I get my half a penny from here? This is what we're about to go into. But to answer Ms. Benedict's request for items that directly and indirectly, disproportionately are affecting our community, it would be arts jobs. And that's what the data shows. And so restoring those 2,500 jobs will be something that is important to me. And when the time comes, if it's possible, I would love to have this caucus's support to make that happen. But I am completely realistic in regard to whether or not it can.
I can go ahead and be the bad guy in the room and say, that is not something I could join with. And in fact, I would advise my colleagues to not be surprised if I'm supportive of 100% elimination when it comes to making way for other essential needs. So I just wanted to get that out there so no one is shocked.
Well, it's important to me that let me back up. What I would is, all right. Too many thoughts at once. It's important to me, Councilman Young, that we have that frank dialogue, right? I mean, that's what we're here to cut to the chase and get things done for our constituents first and foremost, and for our city secondly. And within that also the LGBTQ community. So I think it's important to get those things off our chest. But I would say I would love to hear from the group, what are those sacred cows for each of you? So that, and then as a group, we can talk about them. So, and again, I use the word sacred cow, but I don't mean it like you're going to fall on the knife over arts, Nancy, right? So, sorry, Chair. So I think that it's
yes, yes.
What are those things that we want to make sure get included? Can we list them off and then talk about them as a group? And that the same goes for, what if a tax proposal comes through that's 30 cents by a council member, and we think that bare bones budget is going to make it? Do we want to talk about that as a caucus and decide that's something we can get behind? Or, what do we want? How do we want to leverage our size? Both for the individual pieces like we just spoke about, whether that's employee pay versus, improving employee pay, step, COLA, or protecting their jobs to prevent the layoffs, working to get more federal or state money, ensuring that we have as many arts jobs as possible that directly impacts the community that this caucus represents. What are those? I'd love to hear from everybody. What are those pieces? And maybe we don't know them right now because we just brought this up, but is there a way for us to, in an open meeting format, get those communicated to each other so that then we can address them or prioritize them as we go through the hearings and the rest of the budget process?
I'll go first because mine is short. I have no sacred cows. I think everything is on the table.
Other than what I heard from you previously, Councilor Young, was employees. Certainly, I think you're with me that at a minimum, like what I will not accept is layoffs or furloughs for employees. That's for me is my. Like I would love to get steps, all that other stuff for me too. But for me, the minimum for me is no furloughs or reduction in force of employees. That's that's my minimum is at least to hold on to what we have for employees. Right.
Yes,
I'd love to get more.
I will agree with that.
I would agree with that.
I would too.
So noted, got it. And so that's the bottom. And then if we can do more as we look through the budget pieces, excellent. It sounds like then we'll have something to talk about there. But I've got down as a baseline, no layoffs, RIFs, or furloughs. Sorry, reduction in force is what a RIF, corporate talk.
Fantastic. As I said, there will be times when we disagree with each other, but we will know when it's time to vote as a block, and when that time comes, we will have those discussions. I would like to propose that we have a follow-up conversation on Friday, May the 22nd, which would be following several budget hearings. If I'm not mistaken, on the budget calendar. Do I have that right? The budget, most of those hearings from.
Yep, everything will be completed by the 21st.
21st, is what I thought.
The chair's substitute budget will be released on Wednesday, the 27th. So that gives us, but yeah, all of the operating budget hearings will be done by May 21st.
Well, I'd like to move that we have our next meeting on Friday, May the 22nd at 6 p.m. Is that a proper motion?
Chair?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. If it is a proper motion, I need to wait for discussion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, let's discuss.
That is Memorial Day weekend. So I don't know if we could try to do it earlier in the day for anybody. Not that I think anybody is going on a big trip.
Going anywhere? No one's going anywhere.
Well, we're supposed to be going down to a vacant cabin that our family owns.
Awesome.
I know. So just,
Well, you might need it after all those meetings. I'm just hoping to get my hair done by then. Please let us be in phase 2 by then.
could we do like 4 o'clock maybe instead of 6?
I'm gonna start looking like my high school senior pictures again. I'm not working long, yeah.
It's like I was blonde when I was a kid. I had to work real hard to keep it that way. So 4 o'clock on Friday the 22nd. Does that work for everybody at this point?
That works for me.
This is Brett. I anticipate that I'd be able to make that. Typically, my employer does close the office a little bit early on those Fridays, so I would anticipate that. If that's not the case, I could certainly use vacation time, which I often do for Metro meetings anyway. So, but barring any unforeseen circumstances, I should be able to commit to that. Yeah.
Okay, so the amended motion is for Friday the 22nd, 4 o'clock, for a follow-up meeting with the sole agenda item to be a conversation on the budget and discovering any particular things that we would agree to vote on as a block. We will have plenty to discuss at that point. And a majority of 3 of the 5 would have to agree in order for the 5 to hold to that. With that understanding, all those in favor of having that very interesting meeting on the 22nd.
And that was an interesting comment towards the end about the majority, the 3 of the 5. I know we've done that on issues, especially as that relates to nominations of folks and elections, but that might be a little more tough with a budget. That's a much more. We'll discuss it on the 22nd.
Yeah, I don't, as our original bylaws created, it indicated that would be, I would probably, when we get to that point, as chair, request a unanimous decision. But according to our bylaws, it would be the majority. It would be up to us to convince each other whether or not this is what we wanted to do. But I hear you.
Just for everyone who hasn't been through this quite yet, one thing to think about it is that the way the vote on the budget will actually happen is that you could have the mayor's operating budget proposal and 1 or possibly 2 substitute budgets. Because we had this happen. We had 2 substitute budgets. One of those substitute budgets can have amendments and not the other. So just keep that in mind, is that like, it would be difficult for us unless we literally have whatever those substitute budget or budgets are. It would be difficult for us as a body to, as a caucus, to commit to voting for a substitute budget, for instance, if we haven't seen it or don't know what the amendments are. So I say that all to, I think, give Councilmember Young in particular some, to ease some concerns that we're not necessarily committing. We would not be in a position to vote as a body that we are all going to commit to one substitute or another potential substitute, because we would not yet actually have seen those yet in their basic form, not to mention in their amended form. Does that make sense?
Correct.
So can I clarify? Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, yeah.
So just to clarify, so when we get together on the 22nd, the goal would be that at that point, we will have heard from all of the departments. Those hearings will be completed. I'll certainly be present for every one of those, even though I know y'all might not. And so then I think it would be wise for us to, at that point, have that list of, okay, here's what we know now. These are the things that and we'll know a lot more by then. First of all, we'll have the budget book. But beyond that, we'll have those hearings and see, okay, what really is needed? Where could we possibly cut? How can we get there? And therefore, when we meet on the 22nd, I would hope that we're still talking about things that we might want to propose as amendments or amendments to substitutes. Any substitutes that need to be reviewed by the finance department must be given to the finance department by May the 13th, next week. So no substitutes can be filed. We'll know on May 13th how many people are going to be presenting substitute budgets. And so then from there forward, we won't know what those substitutes are, but from there forward, all we'll be dealing with are amendments. So I think that might help Councilman Withers with, what has happened in the past. But I would hope that on the 22nd, I would hope that what we still might be able to do is just say, all right, it looks like we need to do steps or, whatever the things are, here's the things that as a block we would like to get in whatever amendments or substitutes that are being presented throughout the month of June. And maybe before that final budget vote, we can still, again, reconvene one more time to then decide if as a block we want to pass the final substitute or amended substitute budget. Again, this being a caucus really affords us an opportunity to talk to each other in a manner that we never could have in the past, right? So I'd like to leverage this opportunity to collaborate and argue, right? So go banter, argue back and forth the different points that are important to us, so that we together can work towards getting those items into the overall budget. And again, to the chair's point, we might not agree on all of those things, but again, we have a unique opportunity that we've not had in the past. And so I'd like to see, there's no restrictions, I don't believe, to how often we can meet. So if we could meet 2 extra times between now and the end of the month of June, I would think I would like that time with you. I think it would be valuable time for us to discuss this and look at it from other people's eyes, if that would be appropriate.
Yes, it's absolutely appropriate. I think that we can see where we are on the 22nd and see if we should set an additional meeting beyond that for all the reasons you just described. Yeah.
In the interim, I guess if you guys have any questions that you'd like me to cut, well, first of all, please do attend the meeting tomorrow afternoon at 4 o'clock, especially council members Bradford and Young. And then secondly, if y'all have some questions or things you want me to be on the lookout for in particular in any of the hearings, I guess we have, if there's a way for us to communicate through the council office to get that information, to again,
yeah, no, I appreciate that. I mean, it's like any other meeting where anyone from the body can ask a question or submit a question to the chair to be addressed after the committee members have spoken. I know that Mr. Mendez is going to keep a pretty strict gavel in regard to it probably, but I think that we have in the course of this conversation established a solidarity amongst this caucus in regard to keeping hands off of our public employees, and that's significant, and you can help us keep that in mind as we hear from the departments and hear from other council members on ideas. Then our job is to first and foremost represent the constituents in our individual districts, but then also to be mindful of the LGBTQ community overall in every item and every conversation that's presented. That responsibility falls upon us, and I implore you to take it seriously, as I know you do. The 65 plus and COVID-19 webinar begins at 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. It will be recorded. Please go back and watch it if you can't be there. It will be informative, I'm sure. All the budget procedures and meetings, please go to or put it on your earphone and listen to it the next day. There won't be much to watch, but you can listen. Consider it a podcast, so that you are as informed as possible, because you don't just represent the 28,000 people in your districts. You represent as many as 70,000 LGBTQ people that live in Davidson County. So please keep that in mind. We have, I believe, I think we voted on and confirmed that we're going to hold the next meeting on the 22nd at 4 o'clock. And I will ask the council office to get that on the agenda so that it's doesn't conflict with anyone else's meetings that may be trying to happen during that time period. There are just two other items on the agenda. Is there any other discussion about anything we've talked to so far that you feel like you still need to say something about? Okay, hearing nothing. I had listed other business for discussion, sent information regarding GLAD issued a press release concerning lifting the ban on gay, bisexual, and MSM from donating blood and plasma. The GLAD and others pressured the FDA, and they did lower the deferral period on men who have sex with men from 12 months to 3 months in order to give blood. We're still pushing for a ban to be lifted entirely. There's information that was presented to you in that document that included a statistic that from the Williams Institute that estimated that if the ban were to be lifted, an additional 360,000 men would likely donate, which could help save the lives of more than 1 million people. I wanted to make sure and bring this to the attention of this caucus because it's been something that has just annoyed the heck out of me for a very long time. I personally do not give blood to the Red Cross because of that ban. I feel like it's important that anyone who has the ability and would like to give blood or plasma to do so in this environment. For example, the CDC has been asking, health department has been asking for those who have survived the coronavirus to consider donating plasma. If you were someone who is a gay man, bisexual, or a man that has sex with other men, you would not be able to give that life-saving plasma without indicating your abstinence for 3 months prior to that donation. It's silly. We have all of the tools available to screen blood. It's not an issue any longer, and I think that our community will need blood and plasma, and we should all be able to participate in that opportunity to help our community. And so I wanted to bring this up to the caucus because I feel like it is an action item that a resolution would get lost. But I think that a press release or something that communicates the importance of this would be something that I would like all of us to work on together. And so I'd like your thoughts on whether or not that's a good idea.
Could we all send a letter to the local Red Cross?
What I would like to do is perhaps work on a press release describing all the data that's contained in the GLAD document, information from the task force from the Williams Institute, as well as some work that I've done with the Pride Net from Stanford University to get some language together, circulate that through the council office to the 4 of you. And if you agree to add your name to it, then to issue a statement on behalf of the LGBTQ Caucus regarding this issue as a matter of public press release to individuals both in print and visual media so that a discussion can begin to be present as it relates to our community and our willingness to give this life-saving blood and plasma, but I think a lot of people would be surprised to hear that this ban still exists. So that would be what I would propose that we do, if you guys are okay with it.
I'm fine with that.
Likewise.
Great. Brett, I'm going to particularly reach out to you on this matter because you've got some personal experience. I'd like to include that, and so we can work together on that. I'll send a draft to you, and I'd like to make sure that I particularly get your thoughts on it. Is that okay?
Yeah, no, that'll be fine. Thank you.
Cool. The only other item that I have is about the census. It's the census. It's safe. It affects the amount of money for our community, especially schools. And it's easy, and everyone needs to take the census. The 2020 census.gov, we need to continue to really push that because it has so much to do with funding and recognition. And honestly, as someone who took it in 1990 and had to say two single women in the same household to 2000, when we could say domestic partner to 10, when I was able to put both to this year being able to say that I was married, it was significant. And so we need to make sure that our communities are being counted. There was a lot of effort nationally to keep the question of marriage non-gender related on that document, and we need to make sure and communicate with everyone to simply just fill out the census. So that is all I had. I don't know if anybody else has any other business or discussion.
I have dinner, so I'll move to adjourn.
Second.
Awesome. We did pretty good. We tried to keep it to 2. I thank you all very much for all the things you're doing, seen and unseen. Belated birthday to Mr. Young. And
Thank you.
We're looking forward to a housewarming party sometime in the autumn.
Yes.
If there's no other business, I give a motion to adjourn.
I think one was already offered.
Okay, second it. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Aye. All right, y'all. Take it easy.
Sure.
Peace out. Ciao.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information about this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.